Hey folks, this is Andy Herleff, athletic trainer with Russell Regional Hospital Physical Therapy Department. Today we're going to do another edition of Health Shift, bringing health topics to you at home that we use here at Russell Regional Hospital. Today we're in the beautiful confines of the Schaefer Field Baseball Complex with the new turf, first for this season. Currently the Russell Victoria Bronco baseball team is 14-0, undefeated on their baseball season. So what we want to do right now is talk about some of the things that our athletes on our baseball and throwing programs are doing to stay healthy and well to get them through the season. These activities and exercises are not exclusive to baseball or softball throwers. They can be used as well for any type of overhead athlete, golfers, tennis players, as well as what we call our industrial athlete. Anybody who works overhead, reaching up high. That could be a carpenter, electrician, drywall person, mechanic, who's anybody that spends a lot of time in an upright reaching up position to stabilize and keep their shoulders good and strong. So first we'll go over a few things about some things you can use, then we'll demonstrate a few of these exercises. All right, so for today, what we're going to do for this episode of Health Shift is I'm going to talk about what's called the Throwers 10 exercise program. Throwers 10 has been around in the sports medicine world for about 30 to 40 years. People have changed it, modified it a little bit, but the basic exercise program itself really hasn't changed much. It involves using weights and stretchy bands to strengthen the rotator cuff, the main stabilizing muscles of the shoulder. It can be used to help with rotator cuff strengthening, general arm strengthening. It can be used both from a rehab perspective, coming back from an injury, but most importantly, we like to use it as an injury prevention strategy. If you talk to any baseball player or thrower that has spent a lot of time doing any type of throwing or overhead work, they really work on strengthening their rotator cuff muscle and their shoulder complex. I've worked in the professional and college settings as well as the high school setting, and the good athletes that have prolonged career in their position, whether it be throwing, position player, pitcher, they're always working at maintaining their shoulder strength and stability and flexibility to keep their throwing arm and general body in good shape and in good condition. Throwing is not just the arm, it involves the whole body, and so they're going to be working out, doing some general fitness thing, core stability, and cardiovascular endurance. Those are all key components when you're talking about a throwing athlete, especially a baseball or softball pitcher. So the Throwers 10 program that we're going to talk about today uses both general dumbbells as well as stretchy bands. Stretchy bands are a good item because they provide what we call the eccentric load, the slow letdown. In the throwing motion, it's not so much generating the velocity to go forward, but the muscle strength and stability to slow the arm down after release. And so that's why we really like to use the stretchy bands, because it applies that eccentric load and really strengthens the muscle in the elongation phase or the deceleration phase of the throw. So stretchy bands are really important for that. Additionally, we're going to be doing some exercises that use simple dumbbells. With this program, we're not going to use a lot of weight. My example here today is a 2-pound dumbbell. Very commonly, we're using 1, 2, sometimes 3 pounds. In a post-injury setting, we may be using just the arm weight. But the focus is we're going to do a lot of specific movements with a lot of repetition. You know, throwing is a very repetitive type thing, and we really have to build the muscular endurance. So we're going to be using lightweight with some higher repetitions. Of course, if you don't have a dumbbell or you lose your dumbbell, you can even make weights. This example right here, this is just a tennis ball can that I filled up with sand and taped shut. If you don't have a tennis ball can, you know, a Gatorade bottle or water bottle filled with sand and taped shut just provides a good weight. Like I said, this is probably 2 to 3 pounds, and that's all you need for this exercise program. Stretchy bands good are, again, this is one that I made in the clinic just this morning. It's just got a little clip that we can attach to itself onto a fence with a loop instead of a handle. This band or system right here is actually something that stays in the dugout, you know, here at Schaefer Field. It's got a clip and some loops and handles for the guys to hold on to. This one's nice because it's got 2 sides to it. We'll be using this for some two-handed exercises here in a few minutes. So Doesn't have to be much, you just have to know how to use it appropriately, and we'll go over that here in a second. To demonstrate some of these thrower's 10 exercises, we've got Jackson Cross. He's a pitcher here with the Russell Victoria Bronco baseball team, and he's going to demonstrate, you know, the basics of what we do within throwers 10. So the first thing we're going to do is what we call internal rotation. Jackson's got a hold of the stretchy band, and he's holding it out here, and now he's going to keep his hand level, and he's going to bring his hand into his belly button and just put a little bit of tension on and then bring it back nice and slow. And Jackson's doing a really good job of demonstrating that slow. Like we said, the rotator cuff muscles are to slow the arm down. So we'll just have him demonstrate that a few times. Nice, slow, and controlled. As we said earlier, these things need to be done in 20 to 25 repetitions. So, our next one is what we call external rotation, or rolling the hand out. So Jackson's starting off with his hand right about his belly button, his elbow is still at 90 degrees, holding onto the stretchy band, and now he's going to pull his hand out away from his belly button, or externally rotating the arm to where he gets just about past 90 degrees. And then he's going to let it in very slowly back to his belly button. This exercise right here focuses on three major rotator cuff muscles: supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor, or sits. Okay. Again, those rotator cuff muscles are key to deceleration and controlling the arm through the throwing motion. Jackson's doing a good job maintaining good, slow, controlled movement, especially on the eccentric phase, or letting it back down. And that's the external rotation. Now, we're going to do external rotation in another variation. Now we've got Jackson in what we call a 90-degree abduction. Basically, his elbow is even with his shoulder. This is the actual throwing position, so that's where we want to work. He's got a hold of the band out in front of him, and he's going to roll his hand, bring his hand back to where it's even with his shoulder, and then slowly let it back down. This is mimicking a throwing motion or an overhead swing of some kind. Okay. Again, nice, slow, and controlled. He's doing a pretty good job of keeping his elbow up about shoulder level. Bringing it back, holding it for a short pause, then letting it forward. Working on some good external rotation strength. That is external rotation at 90 degrees of abduction. Now what we're going to do, we did external rotation. Now we're going to do internal rotation. So Jackson is in his starting pose, elbow even with his shoulder, holding onto the band going behind him, and he's going to pull his hand forward and down, and then slowly letting it back. This is working on the subscapularis muscle, one of the rotator cuff muscles. Again, we want to strengthen and stabilize. Again, this is our throwing position. This is where he lives when he's throwing the baseball up on the mound. Okay, so in addition to working the rotator cuff muscle, he's working on his deltoid and trapezius muscles to keep his arm up nice and stabilized and strong. He's doing a good job, again, with that slow, controlled motion. Nice, easy pauses between reps. And when he's doing his actual workout, he'll do between 20 and 25 of these. And that's internal rotation at 90 degrees abduction. For this next one, we're using the double bands. We're going to do both hands at the same time because we're going to do a lot of scapular stabilization. We want both shoulder blades or scapulas to tension up to stabilize in the back. So what Jackson's going to do is he's going to bring his elbows up, pull his elbows back, and then he's going to roll his hand back. This is just like our external rotation exercise, but now we're adding that scapular stabilization. He's squeezing here in his back, holding that position, and then externally rotating, making the rotator cuff work. So we're adding complexity to our exercise program. Again, this is very good, especially when we're controlling deceleration of the throwing arm, because we're not only relying on the rotator cuff, but the scapular muscles, the muscles that run from the shoulder blade and the shoulder joint back to the back and attach up onto the spine and neck. And this is scapular stabilization using external rotation as well. So we have another exercise where we're going to utilize the two-band system, and this is going to be for the lower trapezius muscles. The trapezius muscles go from the shoulder blades down to the back. And so what Jackson here is going to do is he's going to bring his elbows back. That's engaging the shoulder muscles, and he's going to rotate his arms out a little bit. And that's just to create more tension down in his lower back. We're making those shoulder blades pull back and squeeze a little bit, but in the lower fibers. That's why we're staying nice and low with this one. Again, he's doing a really good job of having a controlled motion, pulling it back, holding it steady, and then slowly letting it forward. Again, that eccentric phase, that's so important in this entire program. Good, slow, controlled motion. Nice and smooth, building some good strength. And this is our lower trapezius strengthening exercise. All right, so now you can see we switched over to our homemade sand in a can weight. So what Jackson's gonna do is he's gonna do what we call scaption, okay? This exercise, he's gonna be bringing his hand up at about a 30 to 45 degree angle. Not right in front, not to the side, but he's just gonna bring it up. He's gonna bring it up to shoulder level, maybe just a little bit above, and then he's gonna let it down nice and slow. This muscle is specific to target the supraspinatus, one of the main rotator cuff muscles in the shoulder. Okay, supraspinatus is actually the primary arm lifter, and so that's what it's doing here. It's also one of the primary deceleration muscles through the throwing motion. So again, our homemade weight, it's just a tennis ball can with some sand in it, taped shut. It weighs probably about 2 to 3 pounds. The exact weight, again, isn't important. It's just a matter of having the right weight for your strength level. Jackson is using some good control, nice smooth motion. Again, this is what's called full can or scaption. So now we're still using our sand can. The next exercise is gonna come straight out to the side. This is just what we call abduction, and we're just gonna go to about 90 degrees. So Jackson's just gonna keep a hold of the can. He's gonna bring his hand right out from the side, hand to about shoulder level or 90 degrees. Again, this is another rotator cuff muscle. It's also gonna turn on the infraspinatus, as well as some of the deltoid and upper trap muscles to stabilize. And so he's just gonna lift it up, nice and slow and controlled, and then let it back down. Okay, again, with this weight, this exercise, we're looking about 20 repetitions depending on what your level is. And that's scaption at 90 degrees. For the next set of exercises, we're actually going to be changing our body position. We want to get our back and our trunk parallel to the ground. And to do that today, I'm going to ask Jackson just to use the bench on a knee and a hand. Some exercise programs you'll see where you actually lay down flat on your stomach. That's fine, but as long as we get our trunk parallel to the floor or the ground, that's just fine. The first one he's going to do is what we call a row. This is just like a lawnmower pull. So what Jackson's going to do is he's just going to pull his elbow back, bringing the weight up, bringing the weight to about his side, and then nice and down. Now this is involving a lot of muscles that are a little bit stronger. So right now for demonstration purposes, we're just using a 2-pound weight, but you can definitely use a larger weight, 5, 7, in some cases 10 pounds, depending on what your strength level is. Again, this is working the muscles that run from the shoulder and shoulder blade to the spine. They're big, strong muscles, and so we can use a little bit of a heavier weight. They're also important for the deceleration phase and throwing, and in general strength and stability for the shoulder as well. So we'll call this our lawnmower pull strengthening. All right, so we're gonna stay here in this position. I'm gonna ask Jackson to go ahead and just get in that flat back position, back and trunk parallel to the ground. Now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna bring his hand up to the side. This is what we call neutral position, and he's just gonna bring his hand up to about shoulder level, nice and flat, letting it down. This is working, again, our rotator cuff as well as our posterior deltoid muscles, okay? So now that we're in what we call a gravity dependent position with this dumbbell, which means the gravity is pulling that dumbbell down, creating the stress and putting the load onto his shoulder. Okay, very similar to some things that we do with some bands with the pulling back, but we're just using a little different technique, a little different weight to try and put some different stresses on the muscle. Again, we're using an actual 2-pound dumbbell here. You can use whatever improvised weight that you have. And again, this is shoulder abduction into neutral position. So now what we're going to do, again, we did something similar with the stretchy bands earlier, but now what we're going to do is we're going to have Jackson keep his elbow out. He's going to do that rowing motion, but he's keeping his elbow away from his body, and now he's going to add the roll. He's going to do that external rotation, then let it back down like so. So we're working on 2 different areas here. With the row, or the bringing up, he's working on his shoulder stabilizers back here in his scapular muscles. And then while he's holding that position, he's engaging his rotator cuff to create the external rotation. So again, we're adding layers of complexity, multiple muscle systems working in sync. This helps with timing as well as strengthening of the muscles, and helps keep things in what we call the rhythm of the motion. That's what this will help with. Again, that's a prone row with an external rotation. So now we've got Jackson laying down on his left side. What we're going to do here is another external rotation exercise. He's got his dumbbell in his hand. He's going to start off about his belly button. He's going to bring his hand up to about 95 to 100 degrees, and then let his hand back down all the way down to his belly button. Again, the weight is pulling down, making the rotator cuff work through that rotational motion. It's working our external rotators. That's the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor. Again, he's focusing on the external rotation and the eccentric load coming down. This is where we really get the strength development that we want. It's a little different feel than using the bands because we have gravity pulling it down and he's more in control of it. There's less actual jerking or tension, but it's still an outstanding stabilizing exercise. Sometimes you can use a little more weight in this position. But again, this is side lying external rotation. In addition to a lot of strengthening things, we also need to make sure we're working on our joint range of motion with the shoulder. We want to maintain about 180 degrees of movement within the shoulder joint. So one of the key things we see with overhead throwers is their joint tends to tighten up, especially on the back side. And to combat that, we're going to do what we call sleeper stretch. So right now I've got Jackson laying down on his throwing arm side. So he's laying down on his side. We're going to bring his arm up to where his elbow is right in front of him. Elbow's bent at about 90 degrees. And we call this sleeper stretch because it's just like you're kind of laying down on your arm, okay? I've asked Jackson to keep his chin down on his bicep. That helps trap his shoulder blade down here. So we're not letting the shoulder blade move, and all the motion is going to happen at the ball and socket joint. And so now Jackson's just going to pull his hand down towards the ground. And he's going to start to feel this in the very back of the shoulder. Again, this is a stretch. So when we get to that max stretch position, we're going to hold this for about 20 seconds. Okay? We need to allow time for those muscular fibers and also the joint capsule to really stretch and elongate. And that takes a little bit of time. So this is going to be a slow hold, long hold, about 20 seconds, easy tension on, easy tension off. So you can go ahead and just let your hand come back. Relax, and in the exercise program we repeat that at least 3 times, and that is sleeper stretch. Our next stretch that we're going to do is just a simple classic pulling the arm across the body. But one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure that we're putting the pressure in the right places. So what I'm going to ask Jackson to do is just to bring his throwing arm up. He's going to grab behind his elbow. Okay, we don't want to grab on the muscle or grab down low. We want to grab the elbow, and he's going to pull his elbow basically to his opposite shoulder. Okay, so he's pulling his arm close to his chest as well as over to the side a little bit. Again, we're working on a lot of the posterior side of the shoulder joint, both the muscle and the joint capsule fibers. Okay, just like any other stretch, we're going to hold this for 20 seconds, nice and controlled, no jerking, no bouncing. Okay, and this is something that you should do at least 3 times, nice and easy, 20 seconds. And this is our arm to chest stretch. Now we're changing joints a little bit in our Throwers 10 program. We've done a lot of work on the shoulder and the shoulder joint complex, but part of throwing is also our hand and wrist. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some forearm exercises as well. We're going to use our homemade weight for this next set. What I'm going to ask Jackson to do, he's going to keep his arm, here on the front of the dugout rail, so his form is nice and stabilized. He's just going to grab a hold of the weight. Why don't you move your arm back just a little bit, and he's going to start off with his hand down, fingers pointing to the ground, and he's just going to lift his wrist up, pointing his knuckles back toward himself, and then letting him back down. This is working on a lot of the lateral muscles of the elbow. This is what controls our wrist. And again, just like when the shoulder is slowing the arm down in deceleration, the same thing is true with the final release of the baseball, or the shot put, or the discus, or the javelin. Okay, so we want to make sure we keep these wrist muscles good and strong. Again, just like the other ones, slow controlled movement, especially on the let down to get that eccentric phase contraction. We'll do 20 reps of these, maybe more depending on your fitness level. We're using our homemade weight, so it's about 2 to 3 pounds, and that's usually about right. Okay, and this is wrist extension. Now we're going to do some wrist flexion or some wrist curls. So Jackson again is posted up, stabilized on the front rail of the dugout. He's just going to hold on to, you can go ahead and grip it with your thumb so we don't drop it. He's just going to hold on to the weight, let his fingers come down pointing to the ground, and then just do a little wrist curl, bringing the weight up and his fingers pointing back to himself. This works on the medial muscles or the inside muscles of the elbow, which help control and stabilize the wrist. Okay, this exercise also helps protect the ulnar collateral ligament or the ligament on the inside of the elbow. Okay, and this is wrist flexion. And the third part of our wrist and forearm exercises is what we call pronation and supination, or basically rolling the hand over and back. Okay, and this is something that a thrower will normally do as they come through. It's not just straight down, there's a rotational complex to it as well, and that's what we're going to do. Today we're going to use the dumbbell because we're just going to hold on to the knob end of it. So I'm going to, Jackson again is posted up and stabilized. He's going to grab a hold of just the knob end because that puts our weight actually up above his hand, so we're going to just create a different lever point. And he's just going to turn his hand down as far as his handle and wrist will allow him. Then he's going to roll it back over so his thumb is pointing outside. This works both the medial and the lateral muscles of the wrist to work on their strengthening. And as you can see, he's doing a really good job of nice, slow and controlled movements, allowing the weight to stretch a little bit at the end before he brings it back over. You know, tonight we're using a dumbbell, but if you're doing this at home, simple things like a hammer work really great. Nice stick with the weight out on the end to get that good pivot point and put the stress right where we want on the arm and forearm. And this is pronation supination.